This with a pair of like ripped jean shorts and a s'more. Sign me up. Where can I go for that? Scabious? Scabious? It literally looks like she's on her way to the cul-de-sac barbecue, and I absolutely love that. A little more whimsy, a little more fun, a little extra oomph.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode today. It has been such a long time since I created a pattern roundup, and I think that's just because I really don't force these videos. It's just when I kind of find that a bundle in my Ravelry favorites is starting to overflow that I think maybe I should talk about these things so that I don't have to knit them. But really, this roundup of patterns is something that I kind of thought of the other day as I had thrown on a crocheted cotton sweater that I created a few years ago. It's not a pattern. You can't find it anywhere. It's just something that I had created on the fly, and I'll definitely have inserted a bit of footage of me wearing it in a podcast recently. But I realized that I don't have a ton of similar knit sweaters, and so I really felt like I had a void in my wardrobe when it comes to these, what I'm calling summer sweater layering pieces. Something that's appropriate for a summer evening as it's getting a little bit cooler and maybe you've been running around all day in a t-shirt or tank top and you just need that little extra bit of weight, but it doesn't necessarily need to provide so much warmth. And then this same sweater I think could work really well for spring and fall seasons in just that more transitional time to wear during the day. So now feels like a really good time to be casting on one of these sweaters. And I kind of did just that. And so it made me want to talk about the other ones that I was considering. If you're new here, like I said, I'm Nora. I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut, and I make weekly videos about my knitting and all of the ways in which I like to celebrate the fact that the imperfections are what make something so perfectly handmade. So if that feels like something that you can get on board with, I definitely do recommend that you come hang out with us more often. If you subscribe and ring the bell, then you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. But I do post a new video every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And so with all of that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and dive on in? If you had seen my last podcast episode, then you will have already seen my summer sweater that came from this selection, and that is the Salty Days sweater by Veronica Lindbergh, Kutova Kika. And I think that this is a really great representation of kind of just the vibe, the energy, the idea that I'm running with here, that you can look at some of the patterns you have in your Ravelry library already and maybe approach them with just a little bit more of a summer eye and make a few little modifications to have them better suit the summer. Or you can run with any of the patterns that I'm going to mention today, and they will give you that kind of beachy vibe. So I think that some of the key details and things that made a sweater fit into this category were something kind of oversized, think sweatshirt vibes. End of the day, what do you just want to chuck on to go out to a fire or to a local free concert, outdoors in the summer? So I wanted something that had that kind of oversized fit. It also is super helpful if, like the Salty Days sweater, it has some sort of lace component or a more open gauge, something that it still allows a little bit of a breeziness. I also really feel like something that lends itself well to this kind of summer sweater layering piece is anything that already has sort of like a button placket on the front where you could wear it open if it's a little warm still, or close it up as it gets that much chillier. And those things to me always read as like an outerwear piece, something that you're just chucking on over whatever you have on already. And so as long as it's not something that's like super woolly and thick, I definitely think that you can get away with it, depending on where you live, of course, in the summer months. So I'm going to chat with you about some of the patterns that I pulled for this video. I'll definitely make sure to have all of the details on the screen as far as the size ranges and recommended needle size and all of that jazz. But to include all of the patterns that I've selected, I'll just kind of be breezing through the details that I've picked up on that have made me want to mention them, as well as any of the little differences and approach that I would make to be better suited to this time of year. So again, like the Salty Days sweater, I chose to knit mine up in cotton yarn. This is a work in progress. It's not done yet, but I opted for cotton over a wool merino. I also omitted the folded over ribbed collar and instead replaced it with the eyelet detail that you see throughout the sweater and just knit a little bit of stockinette for a rolled edge. On the bottom, I'm choosing to do a split hem and crop it a little bit. And I just think that when you consider adding all of these little tiny touches, it makes patterns that are already in your library that much more versatile. And it also just allows you to look at a piece a little bit differently. And I personally think that that's a really fun way to go about your knitting. So let me get into the rest of the patterns that I've pulled here. I am going to be reading off of my iPad, but like I said, all of the details are going to be on the screen. And this is in no particular order. I just have an abundance of these things to talk about. Let's start out with a designer that I've discussed before for her absolutely eye-catching, gorgeous patterns. I've yet to knit one, but I have so many of them in my favorites, and that is Jeanette Knits and her Dreamweft Sweater. Now, it's actually inspired by a crochet sweater, so it feels particularly appropriate for this video. And it's basically an all over eyelet circular lace pattern. It has that very like mesh sort of fishnetty look about it. And then all of the finishes and kind of where the shoulder seams are more of a chunky, bold outline. This I just could imagine in a cream colored linen yarn for throwing on even as like a beach cover up. I think this would be so good. And I definitely think that this is one of those patterns, if you knit this for somebody, they're going to love it. Now, she does call for a fingering weight yarn for this pattern, so you'd probably want to opt for something like the Tin Lena from Sandnes Garn if you did want to go that kind of linen-y route like I would. And I just love the way that Jeanette always considers the little details in her pattern. So she even mentions in the Ravelry page that the mesh design, the way that it's knit, it tends to want to kind of like pull over. And I think what she means is spiral in one direction, just the way that you're kind of increasing and decreasing. And for that reason, that's why she included the solid breaks, or what I'm calling more of just those chunky outlines. And for me, I actually think that's a really wonderful feature of the pattern. I think it gives it just that much more of a striking look, but I also love to hear when a designer has thought that far ahead in the issues that could arise from the stitch pattern and how she's already preemptively fixing that for you. It is designed to be worn with about 12 to 16 inches of positive ease around the chest. And she says that it's worked seamlessly from the top down. Sounds to me like a drop shoulder construction where you're knitting the back, picking up the front, and then joining in the round. And she does note that blocking is just so hugely important for this piece, again, because of the way that it wants to twist. Now, this one only has 33 projects on Ravelry so far, but each one of them looks impeccable. And I definitely think that when it comes to choosing a pattern, it's really important to look at the different projects that are already on Ravelry, or use the hashtag to search these knits on Instagram, because for me, I always notice the little flaws or just kind of difficult parts of a pattern when I look at the many different knitters who have tried knitting it before, and you always learn a little something from looking at that. And you can always see the different fibers people have knit them out of, though Jeanette did already knit her sample in a wool cotton blend, so it just screams summer to me. So that is the Dreamweft Sweater by Jeanette Knits. Next up is a really lovely sort of peasant blouse. Oh, almost similar to what I'm wearing right now. A sort of peasant blouse style sweater. It's called Sweet Scabious by Rie Vive. Bear with me on the pronunciation, but this is such an interesting design to me. It has that peasant blouse style where it has the tie at the top and then a really just kind of oversized fit that's a little flouncy and blousey like. And in the photos, they even have it styled over top of another turtleneck. So I feel like you could definitely picture throwing this one on over top of a tank top after a long day in the sun. This one is knit with a light fingering yarn, which is really nice to know that it's going to be that transitional piece in your spring and fall on its own, but then also great for a summer evening since it shouldn't be too heavy. This one's intriguing to me too because they say in the Ravelry notes that you actually start with the front panels and then pick up for the back. I'm assuming that has something to do with the way that the front is constructed in two pieces before it's ultimately joined together at the bottom of that kind of keyhole neckline. But I love that this design features many different interesting components that make this otherwise simple shape something really interesting. So across the front panel, it looks like there's some sort of open ribbing worked there. It's a little tricky to see in the photos, but then it's also surrounded by these really lovely cables. And then as you work your way to the bottom of the sweater, there's additional lace cabley work knit at the bottom and more on the sleeves, and all of it's really different. So I think it gives a very like bohemian kind of eclectic look, which is perfect for that summer season. The sleeves look like they're finished a little more of a 3/4 sleeve, and they have a really lovely balloon blousiness to them. And then of course there's that I-cord edge that you tie off at the front. The yarn that they used for the design is 100% wool, but I think that this would look really lovely in a cotton if that's more your style for a summer knit. This one does only have 8 projects on Ravelry, but again, each one of them is so beautiful and so perfect. I specifically love this green one by Carfield Ma. I think that this would be really exciting to do in a punchy color and be able to just chuck that on with a pair of jeans on a chillier day. Or like the sample, you could totally go for a neutral in this and really have it as that kind of over a tank top, reliable piece that's versatile with everything. So that is the Sweet Scabious? Scabious? I have no idea. By Ria Vive. Next is the Luz Sweater by SD Huango. And this I just came across, and I really love this designer's work from everything that I've seen so far. So this sweater is definitely more of a crew neck sweatshirt vibe to me, as it is knit in a chunkier yarn. It says an Erin weight, and she used Drops Big Merino. Now, I think that you can totally get away with this thicker, chunkier gauge yarn and sweater in the summer because it does have eyelets worked down the whole front of it. So obviously you're not wearing this on an 80-degree day, but certainly if you are by the beach on a windier, chillier day, I think this would be an amazing option to have. I also personally really love merino wool in the summer. I find it to be really breathable, and especially if you're going to be working in these eyelets, I personally think it's a really great option. I love that in the Ravelry notes, it says that there are support videos provided. So it sounds like this would be a great option for all skill levels. The only caveat there being that this one is worked from the bottom up. I know not everyone likes working a bottom up sweater. My best advice for knitting bottom up is to always have a reference garment nearby so that you can always make sure that you're knitting the depth of things according to a garment that you already know fits you, since you don't have the ability to try on as frequently. It's a much easier way to knit, since you can just kind of hit the ground running with the hem and then work towards all of the trickier stuff. But it definitely is a little bit more difficult to get the perfect fit. So that's my best advice as someone who has knit a few bottom up garments. And I've loved all of them in the end. I just do think that it is super helpful to have a reference garment nearby while you're working on it. I love that the body of this sweater is where all of the texture and interest is. There's cabling, lace. It literally looks like a sort of metal chain, like a paper chain, where you have the circle and the circle meeting up together and you hang it across your preschool room. That's what these cable lace patterns look like to me. It's really interesting and beautiful, but then I also love that it's broken up with these linear bits of ribbing. And so I'm always a big fan of the combination of hard and soft and that lace and that graphic geometric design. I always think is a big win. But then something else that I love is that the sleeves are just bare. They're just stockinette. So for the busyness of the body of this sweater, I think it can lean more casual because of those stockinette sleeves. And even in the designer's photos, she just has this on over a t-shirt with a pair of jeans, and it literally looks like she's on her way to the cul-de-sac barbecue, and I absolutely love that. This one has 15 projects on Ravelry, and it looks like people love knitting this in a neutral, but I do think it would be extremely fun to see this one in a bright pop of color, perfect for a spring or summer day. So that is the Luz Sweater by Esti Huango. I don't think I could make this video without discussing at least one Irene Lynn pattern, but let me just say here, if you're interested in making a summer sweater, just go look at Irene Lynn's entire library of designs. She always hits the nail on the head when it comes to adding delicate lace to an otherwise kind of simple garment. I just am a huge fan. I have yet to knit something from her, but always her patterns are in my favorites. And I actually have two of her designs in this roundup. The first of which is her Hailey Sweater. And I think it definitely is a good branching off point from that Luz sweater that we were just talking about, as it similarly has these vertical lace and cable motifs. This one's knit up in a worsted weight yarn, but the whole thing here has that lace and that open knit, so it's definitely going to be a little bit more breathable. And the recommended yarn here is a wool cotton blend, so it's definitely already perfectly suited towards summer. I feel like if the Luz sweater and the Dreamweft sweater from Jeanette Knits had a sweater baby, it would be this one. It has those breaks in the lace at the seams, and then that all over kind of eyelet texture with then just a few cable details that I think make this one that much more suited to wearing kind of day to day. Whereas the Dreamweft sweater, I definitely, you know, kind of need something under that. This, I think, could be a standalone piece, as well as something that you could throw on over whatever else you've had on during the day. There's actually a full comprehensive video of the pattern overview for this one linked in the Ravelry page, so I would definitely suggest checking that out if you're interested in knitting this. But it looks to me like it's a drop shoulder design. You're very standard, starting with the back, picking up for the fronts, working your way down, and then coming back for the sleeves and the collar. And this one has 36 projects on Ravelry. I think the only thing that I'd look out for with this sweater is that if you're not a big fan of an open, wide neckline, then this one might not be the one for you unless you're willing to make some modifications. It is designed to have that more open, wide neckline, but I know that that's something that not everyone is into. But otherwise, I love the cropped fit on this one. I think it looks amazing on everyone who's knit it. And I especially love the ones where people have used yarn that has a little bit more drape. I think it just makes for a really great elevated basic in that way. So that is the Hailey Sweater by Irene Lynn. Continuing in this category of kind of more crew neck with the vertical lace cable details, we have the Lucy pullover by No Quinn. And of the ones we've talked about so far, this is definitely the most closed. It features the most solid fabric and the least amount of open stitches. But I still think that it would be a really perfect summer layering piece. It says that this is knit in a bulky weight yarn, which again, obviously that's a thicker yarn for a summer project. But one of the other things that I think when it comes to these thicker yarns is as long as you're choosing the right fibers, something that she suggests here is Drops Air, which is a blown yarn. While it is a chunkier gauge, it does knit up that much more quickly. So I think it's really great if you're realizing now in the middle of spring that you need a summer sweater, why not knit one up in a chunkier gauge? And it just means that you get to wear it that much sooner come the fall. This one's knit top down, drop shoulder, and it is intended to have that oversized boxy fit. I love the repeated motif on this one. So you have the central lace surrounded by cables, and then it kind of just goes out from there, lace cable, and continues down the sleeve too. So it feels like this is a project that you could kind of get lost in once you've memorized the repeat. I'm sure that it becomes a lot more intuitive. And if you're new to knitting lace, it is nice to have that lace pattern always broken up by cables so that you can more easily keep track of where you're at in the lace pattern. There are 16 projects here on Ravelry, and it doesn't look like of those there's a ton of finished objects. So you might be kind of going at it blind if you decide to knit this one. But it does look like if you start knitting it and decide that you don't want to add sleeves, it would make a really sweet vest. So that is the Lucy pullover by No Quinn. I do have a free pattern here for you as Audrey Borrego has recently decided to step away from pattern designing and therefore is offering her patterns all for free with the intention that there will no longer be support for those knitting patterns. So do just bear that in mind if you're going to knit one of her patterns, but it is really generous of her to start offering them for free. So this one is called the Urraca, and it is that sort of Henley style design. She knit her sample in a DK merino wool. This garment has a set-in sleeve and it is knit from the top down. It also says that there are video tutorials included in the pattern for the button bands and collar, which is always so helpful if you've never knit something that has that kind of Henley style collar. It can just get a little bit confusing where the button placket kind of meets up. But this is such a fresh take on a Henley for me. Starting with the neckline, I find it very interesting the way that there is the folded collar and then it kind of is disjointed at the front where the button placket is. It makes for a lot more relaxed, kind of free people vibe, that sort of undone look. But then I love the special details of the cable twist kind of bordering the button placket. And I especially love the little cable twist at the top of the chunky ribbing at the bottom of this garment. Those are the sorts of things that just set an otherwise simple pattern over the edge for me. I also think that the set-in sleeve gives this one a very store-bought professional look. So if that's something that's important to you, this might be the right choice. Going through the 28 projects that are already on Ravelry, it looks like many people have taken creative liberties with this pattern and have opted to not knit buttons at all or to actually connect that collar to the button placket. Some people did a ribbed collar instead of the folded over option. One person actually did a totally kind of color blocked and striped option, and I adore the look of that. It gives a very sailor kind of vibe for a summer garment. But I just think that overall, this is one of those pieces that once it's in your wardrobe, you'll probably get a lot of wear out of it. It seems like the perfect thing for, for a cooler day in the garden or just heading down to the beach and wanting that extra layering piece. So that is the Urraca by Audrey Borrego. And again, it's a free pattern on Ravelry. Of the designs I've discussed so far, I feel like this is probably one of the more popular ones that I've seen on Instagram. And that is the Simply Me Blouse by Nora Knitters. It is a garter stitch oversized sweater that features a really special box pleat in the back, and that creates for a little bit of an A-line shape, which combined with the 3/4 length sleeves and the boat neck, I think makes for a really lovely, more elevated summery piece. This is something that I think would look terrific paired with a pair of wide leg pants. So again, something that's maybe on those cooler summer evenings. It is knit from the top down. There are short rows included in the pattern. And it even says that there are short rows incorporated into the body of the sweater to avoid so much purling and garter stitch in the round. So that is a really thoughtful detail from the designer. She does use a cotton wool blend for the sample here, and there are 59 projects on Ravelry, all of which look really beautiful. I think it's a very sophisticated and classy design. Obviously, it doesn't have that lace or cabling from all the others. It is called the Simply Me Blouse, and it is that. It's very simple and understated, but I just think that pairing this with jeans, like I said, wide leg trousers and a sandal or something, it would make for a really lovely kind of brunch outfit for the summer or spring months. So that's the Simply Me Blouse by Nora Knitters. Another sort of Henley design, we have the Leopold by Tricot Design MCL. And it's a really great option because with this pattern, you can choose to either knit the Henley or a full button-down cardigan. I love a 2-for-1. The sample here was knit using Sandnes Pure Gint, which is a DK weight yarn. And they recommend about 5 to 8 inches of positive ease. Personally, I would probably size up even another size on top of that if possible, because like I said, really do want a good heap of positive ease in one of these layering pieces. And for me, for the summer, I would definitely opt for the Henley. I love the simplicity of this one, that it just has a really interesting vertical line going down the garment. The way that it's done, it almost gives a look as if it's been quilted or something. There's a little bit of texture in there. And so it doesn't look like it's just a knit section and then rib. It just creates a fabric that has a little bit more character to it. And so I think this is a great option for the summer, but I also think it would carry you through the cooler months as a really nice kind of cabin-y staple. There are 75 projects for this one on Ravelry. And it looks like people have mostly made that Henley, but there's definitely a lot of the cardigan in there too. I love seeing all the different colors that people have knit for this one. There's a really fun grapey purple in there that excites me. But I also think that if I were to knit this piece, I would probably do it in more of a neutral just so that it could play the role of multiple different seasons and ultimately be that much more timeless. So that is the Leopold by Tricot Design MCL. The last one that I have in this Henley sort of category, it's called the Claude Troyer by Johanna Garish. And this is your not so basic because she has these insanely huge buttons on the Henley that really pack a punch. And I think for me, give this otherwise basic garment a little more whimsy, a little more fun, a little extra oomph, which is something that I'm always looking for. It says that it's knitted from the top down, another one starting with the front and then working the back. I also love that it says that the sleeves incorporate some German short rows, which typically means that they're not going to be so bulky because it helps to add that additional length in fabric where you need it and then not so much where you don't. It does typically wind up giving a better fitting garment. So I love that that detail has been included in this pattern. And then I just love this ridiculous button band. It's not even something that could really be considered a Henley kind of quarter zip depth, because the button band comes all the way down past the bust and literally to the waist. But I think it makes for something that would be really great in the summer, because if you open that up, you're going to have so much more airiness. And then we all know those chillier nights, it would be so nice to have something that you could then snuggle up in by having all of the buttons closed. I also love that the button band is double knit, which perfectly balances out the all over texture that comes from the garter stitch. It's another bulky weight one. So yes, it's going to be another warmer one. She uses 100% wool, but I definitely think that this one would work in a blown yarn. So I would maybe experiment with something like that to have something a little bit lighter, a little bit more breathable. There are 43 projects on Ravelry in this garment, and all of them look so fun. This looks like a pattern that people really do have a good time with. Of course, if those giant buttons are not your style, you can always make the necessary modifications to use smaller buttons. You would just have to figure out how to make some smaller buttonholes. But personally, I would have fun playing around with different buttons on this one. I also think that this would be a really good option with some boucle yarn. That would be really fun to see the garter stitch really play with the texture of a boucle if you are looking for something even that much more kind of whimsical. Or like Have You Any Lina did in the project page. I think it looks really, really fun with adding some stripes. So this might be a good option to get some yarn out of stash. And that is the Claude Troyer by Johanna Garish. The other Irene Lynn pattern that I've included in here is her Erin Sweater, and I think it's obvious why it had to be discussed. This sweater sort of embodies all of the elements that I've discussed in the other patterns here, where it has a kind of Henley vibe in that it has a collar that gets folded over the back, kind of sailor style, but it still has all of this lace texture detail throughout the body. And then I love that it's a really cozy, oversized fit. This one is knit up in DK weight yarn, and she uses 100% merino wool in the sample. Looking more closely at the texture on the body, it's actually a little bit of an illusion. I thought that it was lace, but it's all cables. This just feels like something you should be wearing if you're next to a bonfire this summer. This with a pair of like ripped jean shorts and a s'more. Sign me up. Where can I go for that? My favorite little details though are the fact that these little tiny mini cables bleed into the ribbing, and it's done so cleverly. That kind of attention to detail is one of my favorite things about knitting. And then I also love that the sleeves are knit like intentionally too long to then be cuffed back, which just overall gives you that more effortless vibe. There are 74 projects on Ravelry featuring this sweater. And it looks like all of the choices that people have made really do work. It looks like there are some people who chose to knit theirs a little bit more cropped. There's even one where she's wearing it over a bathing suit at the beach. It just screams summer layering. And then those who chose to knit it a little bit more oversized, it looks amazing in that context as well. There are some people who opted to crop the sleeves, to omit that folded sleeve at the end. And honestly, just any garment where you have the opportunity to make those little personal modifications, I'm always just a sucker for that. There's also one Ravelry user who goes by Jet Set Mill who chose to knit hers in a neutral, and then the pop of coral on the sleeves. Oh, that makes me want to make this project. So I would definitely say have fun with it if you plan to make the Erin Sweater by Irene Lynn. Coming up on the last few patterns here, I have 2 cardigans and then maybe my favorite sweater in this whole roundup. The first cardigan I'm throwing in as a little bit of an honorable mention. As it comes in one size, I find that to be problematic, but it doesn't stop me from loving the look of this one. So I mention it to let designers know that one size simply isn't one size for everybody, and we want to knit this pattern. Please figure out how to make it in different sizes, but also I want to mention it so that if you can recommend a similar looking garment that does have more sizes, please let us know what it is down below. But this is the Kama Cocoon by Anne Wenzel, and I just love how oversized this one is. It truly is a cocoon style garment. And even like she says in the description, it's like putting on a blanket. Years ago, I had crocheted a sweater that was way off gauge and I didn't know it. And basically it is a ginormous blanket with sleeves. And I actually leave that in my car for summer evenings. I have used it as a blanket before. I love to go out to just, summer live music, outdoor concerts, and it often gets really chilly by the end of the night. So I've used it as a blanket to just drape over my legs. I've worn it as the proper cardigan. I've even laid it out as something to sit on if I forgot to bring my chair or I just couldn't get my chair to the actual place where the concert was taking place. So I think that garments that have this mega oversized blankety vibe to them are a perfect option for the summer. And I'd love to know if you can recommend one like that. The next cardigan is the Chantal Cardigan by Urraca Knit. And this is actually something that gives more of a robe vibe to me, but I did feel like it was in that same vein of like a very blankety type garment. So this is a little bit of a longer cardigan and it has an oversized fit. It says that it's worked from the top down in slip stitch. I love the texture that provides, but then I also love how it's balanced out again with a double knit button band that has no buttons. And then you're instructed to knit a thin I-cord belt to go along with it. This sample here is knit in a worsted weight yarn, and I would definitely recommend going with something that at least has majority wool content for this one so that it remains really lofty and lightweight. But I just think that this is that like elevated loungewear kind of basic. I would personally probably knit this up in a white or a lighter kind of pastel color. Something that just throwing it on over top of anything would be a good piece to grab on your way out the door on a summer evening. There are 20 projects on Ravelry and each one of them looks really beautiful. It looks like one knitter decided to crop hers and omit the belt. And that texture just makes for a really lovely basic cardigan. But then the ones who really went for it, like this agouche on Ravelry, oh my gosh, that just looks like the most divine thing for a summer morning to go out and drink your coffee before the sun is totally blazing, when it's just got that little bit of chill in the air and a pair of lounge shorts. You literally would look like something from a movie. And then again, to just grab on your way out the door on a summer night. I think that this Chantal cardigan is stunning. Last but not least is a pattern that I saw a couple of years ago now, and I actually looked at it and could not figure out for the life of me how it could be made. So I saved it in my Ravelry for later. And to be honest, I still look at it and wonder, how on earth does one make that? And that is Eucalyptus by Junko Okamoto. This is a worsted weight colorwork sweater. And I believe that you can purchase this pattern on its own in Ravelry, but it also comes in a book, and then there's a link for a kit to make this sweater. The sample is knit in Horizon, a verb for keeping warm yarn, and that is 100% wool. And this sweater just gives the most nostalgic nostalgic kind of 90s corded sweatshirt vibe. It of course helps that these sample photos were done on the beach, but I love the play with the color work here, that essentially the whole sweater has pinstriping between two colors. In the photos, it looks like they've used a sort of burgundy plummy yarn and then more of a gray beige color as well. And that's pinstriped throughout the whole sweater, but then it's broken up by these large colorwork motifs that are eucalyptus leaves. If you've never seen Junko Okamoto's work before, it's always playing with scale and proportion and interesting lines. So if you're feeling like you're craving something a little bit different, you should definitely go check out their work. It says it's recommended to have up to 20 inches of ease at the bust, so you definitely want to make this one a little more oversized. And it is knit from the top down. One of the things that's really intriguing to me about this one, and why I think it does lend itself so well to being a summer sweater, is the fact that there's no ribbing on it and instead has very clean, minimal finishes. And the V-neck doesn't totally come to a point. It looks like the V-neck has a little bit more of a square shape to it, which just makes it, I don't know, it has such a special look to it. I would love to knit this sweater. There are 24 projects on Ravelry, and the color combinations that people have done are so beautiful. I do think that personally, the sample is still my favorite color. And the one thing that I'm seeing from looking at the project photos is I think if you're going to make this, you really need to commit to that positive ease, because it does look its best when it is just this oversized, casual, sweatshirty sweater garment. I think from the projects, my favorite one would be the Pantone 2557 project, where they used a green and a gray, or maybe it's a white, but I do love that option. And of course, it being eucalyptus, that feels appropriate. But I really think that the sample got it just right in that tan and burgundy. Oh, it doesn't even look knit. It literally looks like it's printed on. And that's why I think this is my favorite option in the whole roundup. Wow, okay, I knew I had a lot of patterns to talk about, but I feel like that was a lot of information. And so if you're having trouble keeping up like I would, I'm definitely going to make sure to have a link down below that includes all of the patterns that I've discussed here today, all in one bundle on Ravelry. And I think that there's even a few more in there that just didn't totally make the cut for talking about in today's video. I do try my hardest to only include patterns in these roundups that I feel like haven't received the most attention, or as much attention as they deserve. So I hope that you were at least able to discover a new designer, a new to you pattern today. And if you did, please let me know down below what that was. But I'd also love to know if you have a recommendation for what should be on this list. As you guys let me know your kind of summer layering favorites, I can also include those in the bundle so that we can all just kind of crowdsource recommendations like a big old knitting group. So thank you so much for watching this video today. If you did enjoy it and this style of content, you can let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. And like I had said earlier, if you subscribe and ring the bell, you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can always count on there being an upload on Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And with that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.